The Aleutian Islands have been enveloped in history, yet shrouded by time. The islands have been inhabited by the Aleut people living with the land and sea for thousands of years. A vast array of creatures from the land, sea, and air have utilized the islands. Like visitors from the infinity of time, the Aleut people have called these islands home. In the Aleut language, they are known as the Unangan people, with an estimated population of around 25,000 people prior to the European contact, upon which the traditional and customary lifestyles of the Aleut people were disrupted. Russia laid claim to Alaska in 1770, exploiting the coastal areas for furs. It's estimated that 80% of the Aleut population died from introduced diseases they had no immunity to. In the 1700s, Russian traders visited the Aleutian archipelago and impacted the people and creatures that called the islands home. Russian traders took Aleut women and children hostage to force the Aleut men to hunt foxes and sea otters so the Russians could have their pelts, and often enslaved the Aleut men. As the efforts to obtain pelts extended to other creatures such as the fur seal, many of the creatures were forced to the brink of extinction. Still others were doomed and pushed into full-blown extinction, like the stellar sea cow and the mysterious sea ape. In the mid-1700s, a German scientist named George Steller had joined Vitus Bering on his great northern expedition, where Steller had named many animals we know today, such as the Steller sea lion, the Steller eider, and many, many more. The Steller sea cow itself lasted only 27 years after it was discovered and named. Due to its inability to remain submerged, it was often caught on the surface of the water by the hunters. Being 25 feet long, 20 feet in circumference, it was extremely vulnerable to man. George Steller identified another creature he referred to as the sea monkey. It was 5 feet long and had a tail like a fish, and it would watch the men on the ship as they were doing their duties. The men often tried to shoot one, but were unable to harvest a sea ape. The impact the Russian traders had on the people and creatures that called the islands home took a toll on their way of life. Steller had a sea cow preserved in formaldehyde on board the ship that would have been the only sea cow as a scientific collection, but was forced to throw it overboard when they were caught in a deadly Aleutian storm. There was only one sighting that Steller had of the sea monkey, and it's never been spotted again. There's still much discussion on what the creature was. Steller clearly knew the other animals that were there and defined them in his journal. And it's very well described in his book, Where the Sea Breaks Its Back. In 1896, the Klondike gold rushers used the Mackinac and Unalaska Islands as a staging ground to build ships and prepare for their spring journey up the coast of Alaska to the Yukon River when the ice broke. It's been estimated that over 10,000 people inhabited these islands once again, impacting the Aleut population and creatures that called it home. In the 1900s, war came to these isolated islands. The Aleutian Campaign of World War II began on June 3, 1942, when the Japanese bombed on Alaska and the Mackinac Islands. Change had once again come to the people and creatures of the islands. As a result of the attack, 900 Aleut residents were evacuated to southeast Alaska. Talking with descendants of the evacuees, the thing they hated the most, besides having to leave their homes, were the trees that blocked their view. Having been living in a land where the sky, land, and sea embraced each other, the trees blocked their view of the world around them. In the 1960s, commercial fishing processors established themselves on the islands. The industrial refuse and increased food sources have created a man-made environment that both pollutes bays that used to be pristine, as well as creating increased food sources that draw creatures from the land, air, and the sea, that often create conflicts for man and animals. Many of these bays where refuse outfalls exist have decimated many of these water bodies into a barren environment. Thanks for joining me, Alaska Spirit Traveler. And remember, Jankul Washte Omani. Walk a good road. Thanks.